Welcome back to another video. My name's James from Bike Lock Wiki, and in this video we'll be comparing two Sold Secure silver rated folding bike locks, the Foldylock Compact and the Kryptonite Kryptolok 685. As a quick heads up, the Foldylock Compact I used for destruction testing was one that I've owned and used for over 4 years. So as you can see, it's already picked up several scuffs from accidental drops and knocks when being used. First up, we have the basic drop test, dropping each lock from shoulder height, which is roughly 1.6 meters, 5 times to test the durability of the lock's outer shell and to simulate how well it will stand up to wear and tear over the years. On the final drop, the plastic mechanism cover of the Compact popped out. This was secured by 4 plastic tabs which snapped upon impact, but this didn't alter the way that the lock worked, and I was able to stick it back in place despite the 3 tabs being broken. 685 up next, again dropped 5 times from shoulder height. This lock had only been used for 2 weeks at this point, so as you can see it had very little wear to begin with. The plastic casing showed several scuffs and scratches afterwards, and I noticed a crack near one of the rivets, but the lock still worked as it should do, so no real problems here. Next, brute force hammer testing using a 1.6 kilogram lump hammer and a steel anvil to strike the lock 10 times in multiple locations. The Compact's plastic housing took a good battering, and as you can see, some of the plastic was bent out of shape. One of the rivets I struck during the testing stiffened up, and upon testing the locking mechanism I was unable to open the lock, so the locking mechanism must have been damaged by a blow of the hammer. Still, if the lock was secured to your bike, it wouldn't have released and would have protected it from theft here. 685 up next, which lost its keyhole cover and some of its plastic housing on the first few blows. The plastic housing deformed a fair amount and one of the lock's rivets stiffened up like the Compacts did, but when tested the locking mechanism was still operational. However, without its plastic housing in place, I did struggle to relock the 685 once opened. Next, the HSS or high-speed steel hacksaw test, which I run for at least 2 minutes to see how resistant the locks are to a fairly standard hacksaw blade. I removed plastic housing from the locks for this test as it provides a better view of the action. I've attempted to cut several of CT Lock's products with a HSS saw blade before without much luck, so wasn't expecting to make much progress here either, and after 2 minutes of sawing you can see that the Compact's hardened steel plates resisted the saw attack very well. I changed out the saw blade for a new one to cut the 685, and as soon as I started cutting I knew this was going to be an easier cut to make. The progress made here was much faster and I could see the metal flaking away underneath the blade. In 2 minutes of sawing I was able to cut completely through the 685's plate. Bear in mind however, this figure was obtained from lab conditions using a vise and a fresh saw blade. It'd be extremely difficult to replicate this style of attack on the street, as folding locks are very difficult to hold still. Instead, this test serves as an insight into the resistance and overall quality of either lock's plates. Since the results we had here were so different, I wanted to run the test again, so I went against the Compact for another 2 minutes, producing a slightly deeper cut than the first attempt. With the blade still fairly sharp, I started again on the Kryptolok 685, and in half the time, or 1 minute, I was able to achieve a more substantial cut than I was able to with the Compact. Overall, these results suggest that the hardening process for the Foldylock Compact is superior to the Kryptonite 685s for repelling hacksaw attacks. Now, carbide blades are known to be a good way to cut through hardened steel, so I like to include a test with a carbide saw blade as well to see how locks perform. Compact up first, and to be clear, the blade had been used several times before, but was still in good condition with most of the tungsten grit still in place on the blade. After 2 minutes of cutting with this, my arms were getting tired and I wasn't able to make a full cut through the Compact. A deeper cut than with the HSS blade however. As you can see, plenty of tungsten grit left on the blade, so I moved on to the Kryptolok 685 without replacing it. I started cutting but had to retighten the clamp as the lock was moving around, and after 2 minutes of cutting with the carbide blade, the 685 showed similar damage to the Compact. My arms were tired at the end of this test, but I was impressed to see both locks survive against the carbide blade. Again, this method of attack wouldn't be viable on the street as the lock would be too difficult to hold still. Bolt cutter testing next, starting with my smaller 24-inch bolt cutters. These are small enough to be concealed on the street and are commonly used by thieves to defeat lower quality bike locks. The Foldylock Compact up first, and after 3 minutes of awkward struggling, I'd hardly dented the 5mm hardened steel plate, despite using the ground and my full body weight for leverage. After testing, I noticed the blades of the bolt cutters had been pushed apart by the force applied when attempting to cut the plates, so I readjusted the bolt cutters for the Kryptolok 685's turn. After over 2 minutes of cutting, the Kryptolok 685 had held strong against the smaller bolt cutters and didn't show much more than a scratch. I also needed to readjust the bolt cutters again as the jaws had been pushed open. A good performance by both here, with no complaints from me other than my arms being pretty fatigued by this point. 42-inch bolt cutters are the largest readily available bolt cutters on the market and are almost impossible for thieves to conceal on the street. They're therefore unlikely to use cutters this big. As you'll see here, they're also ridiculously heavy and awkward to operate. I had expected both locks to succumb to the huge jaws of the 42-inch cutters, but after another tiring 2 minutes, the Compact held strong and only showed a nick in the plate. Again, the cutter blades had been pushed apart, so I tightened them back up for the Kryptolok 685. From the get-go with the 42-inch cutters, I didn't have high hopes for the 685, but was massively surprised with how it performed. Both locks were rotating in the jaws of the cutters, hence why you see me trying to keep them still with my foot, as cutting when the lock isn't flat will cause permanent damage to the blades. Upon inspection, a small split at the beginning of the cut area on the 685, but it held strong and resisted for over 3 minutes. Great performance here from both locks. The rivets of folding locks are often targeted by thieves as a weak point, which is why I don't recommend the use of low quality folding locks for everyday use. Starting with the Compact, I used my 24-inch bolt cutters to attempt to split the rivet by sliding the jaws between the plates. The Compact's plates are chunkier around the rivet, which made it extremely difficult to insert the lock into the jaws of the cutters. Additionally, the Compact uses impressive rivet protection. A small steel coil is wound around the rivet's armour, specifically designed to prevent this sort of attack. After nearly 3 minutes of cutting, I'd made little to no progress and was unable to get the lock to stick into the jaws of the cutters. The Kryptolok 685's plates are the same width along the plate and use one large internal washer to protect the rivet with no outer coil or spring. I was surprised at how easily the protective washer split under the pressure of the bolt cutters. You see a small piece of it fall out here after my first cut attempt. With the internal rivet now exposed, it put up little resistance against the cutters and the lock popped open. Since this was a much easier fight than I'd experienced with the Compact, I tried again to make sure it wasn't a dodgy rivet, and despite it taking slightly longer, the same thing happened. The internal washer cracked and then the rivet gave way under the pressure of its plates being forced apart. Taking a look at the two broken rivets shows us that one was cut, albeit not very cleanly, by the bolt cutters, and the other had one end sheared off from the pressure of the jaws pressing the plates apart. Impressive resistance from the Foldylock Compact and a questionably poor performance from the Kryptolok 685. Now, before we take a look at how either of these locks performed against more advanced tools such as angle grinders and nut splitters, we'll take a look at how practical they are to use, the features they offer, and the quality of their design and materials. I do recommend anyone interested in either of these to pay attention to this section, as it will help you understand if either of these locks are suitable for securing your bike. Comparing the weight of the Compact and the Kryptolok 685, you can see that the Compact is ever so slightly lighter. But to be honest, the difference in weight here isn't noticeable, and both locks are suitable for carrying in a bag or mounted to your bike without your ride becoming too uncomfortable. Shackle thickness is always interesting, as it can help us to understand why some locks are more resistant to cutting than others. As we found out during testing, both of these locks held strong against the 24 and 42-inch bolt cutters, which was a surprise to me. The Compact's plates measure in at roughly 5.18mm thick, and the Kryptolok 685's plates measure almost exactly the same at roughly 5.15mm thick. Both of these folding bike locks earned the Sold Secure Silver pedal cycle rating. The silver rating means these folding locks are suitable for use with medium to low value bikes that don't attract second looks from passers-by. Personally, I wouldn't recommend using either of these with bikes worth over $1,000. Instead, you'll want a more secure lock. Both brands offer a Sold Secure Gold rated folding lock, the Kryptonite Evolution 790 and the Foldylock Forever both offer a higher level of security at Sold Secure Gold. If you specifically need a bike lock for an e-bike, you'll want to look out for the Sold Secure Powered Cycle rating, which is found on products like the Lightlock X1 or the Hiplock D1000. As we discovered during destruction testing, the casing of the Kryptolok 685 was much less durable than the Compact and was very easy to remove. The casing of the Foldylock Compact looks and feels higher quality and is likely to show less signs of wear and tear over time. Both of these locks use a slider cylinder, which are commonly found on automobiles and high-value items. Both are resistant to picking methods such as raking, and to be honest, hardly any bike thieves are going to have the skills required to pick a lock in the first place and will almost always opt for brute force or power tool attacks. Anti-drill plates sit at the front of either lock cylinder, which prevents the locks from being drilled and also provides extra protection against other forms of manipulation. Overall, both cylinders offer a good level of protection, and this is unlikely to be an area targeted by thieves. In addition, I did prefer the design of the Compact's locking mechanism since it prevents the lock from flopping open when unlocked, whereas I did find the 685 to be slightly loose, and when unlocked it can flick open, potentially damaging the paintwork of your bike. Bike lock maintenance is very straightforward. Moving parts require lubrication to prevent corrosion over time and to keep them moving smoothly. So for a folding lock, this means a quick spray of white lithium grease into each of the rivets, wiping away any excess with a clean cloth. Follow this up with a few squirts of a lock-specific lubricant into the locking cylinder and rotating the key to loosen any debris from inside and allow the lube to penetrate all of the moving parts. Then, using a clean cloth, wipe away any excess and you're good to go. I always recommend monthly or bi-monthly cleaning and lubrication, as it's always best to be proactive rather than reactive in your fight against corrosion. The Foldylock Compact is supplied with 3 keys, whereas the Kryptonite 685 comes with 2. Both Kryptonite and CT Lock offer a key replacement service to their customers, so keys can be replaced if new copies are required. Upon purchase, I highly recommend taking note of your key code supplied and taking a picture of it before you start using your lock. This way you'll have it to hand if you ever lose your keys. One key related feature the Compact lacks is a keyhole cover, whereas the 685 offers a manual keyhole cover, which prevents dirt and debris from entering the locking mechanism, reducing the amount of maintenance the lock requires over time. Both locks are supplied with a mounting system that works relatively well. These mounts can be quickly attached to your bike in a few minutes and will hold your lock firmly in place while you ride. I did notice the Kryptolok 685's mounting system is quite rattly on bumpy sections of road, whereas the Compact is silent when mounted but can be stiff to insert and remove when new. Locking your bike with either of these locks is very easy. Now, the most effective method is to secure your rear wheel and frame at the same time to an immovable object such as a bike rack or a street light. Additionally, I always like to use a cable extension with my bike, as this allows me to secure my front wheel and gives me some extra peace of mind and prevents opportunist thieves from removing it whilst I'm away. Whilst a few of my viewers have seemed baffled by my comments on sustainability when it comes to bike locks, there is a lot that companies can do to lessen their impact of their activities on the environment. Apart from a few single-use cable ties, Kryptonite's packaging is predominantly made from cardboard, which can be easily recycled. CT Lock's packaging is predominantly cardboard, but they still use plastic blister packaging on their products, which makes it harder to recycle, but not impossible. Kryptonite talk briefly about sustainability on their website and in a bit more detail on their parent company Allegion's website. CT-Lock don't really mention sustainability and are a substantially smaller company than Kryptonite. I do feel overall that both companies should be doing more to push sustainable manufacturing, especially a company like Kryptonite, who have an opportunity to lead by example here. When it comes to warranties, it's nice to see that both of these companies stand behind the quality of their product. The Foldylock Compact is supplied with a 3-year warranty, which is activated when you register your keys on their website, whereas the Kryptonite 685 is supplied with a 10-year guarantee on materials and workmanship. 685 up first, and after 2 minutes I only managed to split the lock's protective washer. Despite loosening and reattempting the cut, the nut splitter was too tight to turn further and I gave up. The Compact went into battle second and provided similar resistance to the 685. Its internal rivet protection clogged up the way and prevented the blade of the nut splitter from making contact with the internal rivet. By this point, I'd spent nearly 3 minutes tightening the nut splitter before giving up. To my surprise, upon inspecting the state of the rivet up close, it gave way under the pressure of the nut splitter, reminding me why I always wear protective equipment when conducting these tests. I really wasn't expecting the Compact to break during this test since it resisted the side cutter attack so well. Good performance from the 685 and a narrow fail from the Compact. It is worth mentioning that it would be very difficult for a thief to use this method of attack on the street, as tightening the nut splitter requires 2 hands, so they'd struggle to hold the lock still. For this reason, nut splitters are also not as common in a thief's toolkit as a pair of bolt cutters. Angle grinder testing up next, and before we begin I wanted to point out that neither of these locks are designed to resist power tools. Any bike lock without special anti-grinder features can be cut quickly with an angle grinder, and to provide comparison to the results shown here, I've cut through the Kryptonite New York Standard D-Lock, which is 16mm thick and offers the Sold Secure Gold pedal cycle rating. For accurate representation, I cut through the New York lock 4 times, giving us an average cut time of 15.7 seconds. Now to find out how either of our folding locks compare. The Kryptolok 685 up first, which cut faster than I was expecting over its 6 cuts, providing us with an average cutting time of 6.11 seconds. Again, it's important to remember that these times are obtained from lab conditions, using a vise and a top quality angle grinder. On the street, a thief would have to cut one-handed using their other hand to stabilize the bike lock, making it significantly more tricky. Compact next, which took longer to cut than the Kryptolok 685 and put up a reasonable fight, providing an average cut time after 6 cuts of 10.07 seconds. These times are substantially different, which could be due to the fact that the Kryptolok 685 is the same width the whole way down, whereas the Compact starts wide and gets thinner in the middle of the plate. This also suggests to us that the Foldylock Compact uses a higher quality steel for its plates that's more suitable for use with anti-theft devices. To summarise, both of these locks performed well during destruction testing. Overall, I'd say that the Foldylock Compact came out on top in terms of security. It resisted the 24-inch side cutter attack and the HSS saw attack, whereas the 685 felt significantly easier to cut with both. I also prefer the overall look and feel of the Compact as well. It offers nice features like the silent mounting system and its locking mechanism, which doesn't flop open when unlocked. As always, I'll leave key details and links to either product in the description down below. I hope to have answered all of your questions. If not, leave me a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.